Hello and welcome back to the AFL High Performance Podcast for strength and conditioning coaches and footballers. My name is Jack McLean. I'm your host, and today I'm lucky enough to be joined by Greg King. Our key topic for today's chat will be everything that you need to know when it comes to football periodisation and how you can translate that across multiple sporting codes. Welcome, Greg. Thanks for jumping on, mate. Really looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, hi Jack. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's a real privilege to be on your show and speaking on this topic. And yeah, I've had a good listen to a lot of your episodes, and as I said, real privilege to be able to share my thoughts on this topic with you and to your listeners.
Yeah, it's a dynamic topic, periodisation. I think it interests a lot tuning in, whether you're in the medical world side of things, coaches, technical coaches, and of course strength and conditioning coaches, sort of our bread and butter on how we combine or live in a contrast world and get the best football performance, which doesn't necessarily mean the best maybe fitness results or squat results, but yeah, hopefully helping the team win and players play their best football. Um, I guess take us back to the start, mate. When did you first discover your passion for strength and conditioning? And you've had a great range of worldly experience in the industry. Yeah, talk us through, I guess, your journey so far.
Yeah, I kind of came to be a fitness coach in football. Possibly a bit more of a reverse route than a lot of people in terms of I was more interested in the coaching side of it when I was younger. I think I started coaching my brother's under 12s team when I was around 15 and had a real passion. Wasn't a great player. I enjoyed playing the game. I came to it a little bit late, growing up playing rugby league until I was about 10, and then moved into football. So from there, I became a PE teacher once I left school, and I did that for around 10 years and continued, got some of the coaching licenses that were available. Because I was a PE teacher, I became more interested in, I guess, the fitness and conditioning side of things, injury prevention, etc. Uh, yeah, and then as a bit of a frustrated coach who hadn't played at a professional level, I guess once I got to a point where I just wanted to pursue it at a professional level and try to make my way into professional sport. So went back and studied the the Masters Strength and Conditioning at Edith Cowan University, which a lot of people have done, which was a fantastic course, and met some amazing people and learned a hell of a lot. So I did that when I was in my late 20s, and yeah, along the way, I had some fantastic help from excellent mentors to then help me progress into professional sport. So yeah, I guess, in terms of the topic on periodization, within that time, obviously a lot of coaching of football, soccer football, but as a PE teacher, being a young PE teacher in a school with a lot of older teachers, I ended up coaching a huge range of sports, from basketball, hockey, um, um, cricket, rugby league, coached a lot of rugby league as a teacher, and just threw myself into everything, trying to get as much time out of class as I could and get the kids at the school doing as much sport as they could. So had a real passion for coaching and coaching different sports, and having multi-sport athletes at the school. So that's I think an important part of the background.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and then from there, my first obviously working quite a bit of time working voluntary work and some really sort of low paid jobs across semi-professional sport. Soccer, a little bit rugby league, a little bit Australian rules football in Sydney, and then yeah, from there I was able to move into a part time gig with Port Adelaide Football Club, Port Adelaide Power, and starting off with the feeder team, the Port Adelaide Magpies, which was a fantastic start. Felt like felt like I was working a full-time job in professional sport. Um, it was part-time, part-time pay. So luckily I had the teaching background, and I moved down to Adelaide and did some teaching, and then as often as I could, I did my role with the Magpies, and as often as I could was involved with the professional program with the Power, and that was my start in professional sport. Obviously, in Australia, it was football. In my second year there, I was full time with the Power, and helping out the Magpies where I could. But we filled that role with somebody else. So it took some time and a lot of work, but I got there. And then since then, moved back into sort of my real passion area, which is soccer, football, and worked with Adelaide United in the A League. And from there, I went to Yokohama F Marinos in the Japan J League, and then from there, I moved to where I am now, which is Shanghai Port Football Club in the Chinese Super League, which people probably aren't overly familiar with, but it's probably the biggest team sport competition in China, and it's extremely well supported, and it's a good league to work in.
Awesome, fantastic. It was the goal to travel with the role, or was it a matter of just more taking the best opportunity as it's in front of you, and being open to, I guess that's sort of one of the beauties of our trade. Like,
Yeah,
technical coaches have to stick to probably the one sport. There's not many get tactical coaches to get to move around. Where S&Cs, we can, if there's physical demands to it, we can work in it. Was that a goal of yours, sort of a dream early days, or was it sort of more happened organically?
yeah, 100%. It's been organically, and yeah, working off what you mentioned in terms of as an S&C fitness coach, um, and also working in football, then you have an opportunity to be quite flexible in where you go. So um, obviously can move between different sports and also can move between different countries. So sort of use that to my advantage a bit, and just gone sort of where it's taken me. And you sort of have you don't you sort of have these dreams to work in a big European league, but you don't really have too much time to think about it. You do what's best for your family. You do what's best for your career. You take opportunities when they come, and luckily, I've had a really supportive, amazing wife who's happy to move around, and now with kids as well. Really adaptable kids who are just, yeah, amazing. And now I've had experience in three different countries, schools in three different countries. So yeah, that's sort of how it's developed, and I'm I'm really happy with it.
And no doubt you've been exposed to some world class practitioners who have been your strongest influences of your philosophy so far.
Yeah, there's many, and when I read when I saw the question, I could have made a huge list, but I'll try and keep it sort of more on topic with what we're discussing today. And I mean, the first that I have to mention is Darren Burgess, who obviously has a lot of experience and a really strong reputation across both AFL and football. So we actually played a bit of football together in Sydney. And then, yeah, at the time I was a teacher, quite maybe even still I think I was still studying to be a teacher. So I was doing my bachelor's course in human movement and PE teaching. And yeah, I saw what he was doing. I believe he was working with Parramatta Power, which was an NSL team, the old National Soccer League in Australia. He was working there at the time, and I followed his career and stayed in touch over the next probably, you know, up to 10 years, following his career. Visited him when he was at Liverpool, went and spent some time there. And then as I got closer and started my masters, He was now back at Port Adelaide around 2012, 2013, I think it was. And yeah, during my school holidays, I would just fly down to Adelaide and spend a week or two there, going into training, asking a lot of questions, and yeah, the hard work, that kind of, I guess, foresight and um, you know work to stay in touch and paid off because he was the one that offered me the role with the Magpies to start with, and then promoted me into the professional setup there. So and then particularly in terms of periodization, conditioning, I've learned a hell of a lot from him in terms of planning, um, conditioning models, conditioning principles, how to structure the week, how to structure the season, all those things. And so that's definitely an important one. Also at Port Adelaide, the when I first started working there, Ian McKellen, who was the head of athletic development at the time, and learned a hell of a lot from him around, how to structure the off-field stuff to complement what's happening on field. He and I were always of the same opinion that what happens on the field is the key, for performance, and what happens on the field has to be structured around the demands of the game and how you want to play the game, and then working in the off-field stuff and the complementary stuff on field as well, in terms of whether it's speed training or some other kind of physical technical work, on the field. He was a really important mentor for me. Yeah, and then once I moved into football with Adelaide United, I had a really close relationship with the assistant coach, a guy called Pal Marti, who's a Spanish guy at the time. We had a Spanish head coach, and he was the assistant coach, and he was really open with teaching me the methodology from Barcelona, which is where that particular group of coaches had spent most of their time. They'd worked a lot through the academy and learnt their periodization model and how to implement it in different situations. Coming in as their, I guess, local fitness coach, strength and conditioning coach, to help strengthen their program. Uh, you know, it was important that I learned how they wanted to do things and what that looked like, what the demands of that were, what things I needed to change, and how I could complement the program. Um, yeah, moving to Japan. When I went to Japan, it was three Australian coaches. It was Ange Postecoglou was the head coach or the manager, and then the head assistant coach was a guy called Peter Klimowski, and also learned a lot from Peter. He had a conditioning coach background. Now he was the head assistant coach, and yeah, when I moved there, he was predominantly in charge of periodization and building what the training process and the training plan looked like. He worked in with me in terms of what my principles were and how we could fit those in. But it was a obviously I was in charge of a lot of the off-field stuff because it was just the three coaches that went there, and I had to manage a lot of the local staff to bring them up to speed with what we want to do. So in terms of planning, training, and periodization, him and Ange had a specific way of doing it, and yeah, I was over the 2 years with those two guys. I learned a lot in regards to how they achieve their levels of performance that they've been able to at that time and prior. Um, so yeah, that was sort of my intro, and then as I've developed, I'm now working with a head coach manager called Kevin Muscat. So I worked with him in Japan at Yokohama, and I've moved with him now to Shanghai Port, where he trusts me and relies on me to build now our program and implement our periodization strategy, um, um, with me sort of leading the way. So yeah, I just felt we needed to break away a little bit from what, we were a bit tied to some of my older, I'd had Pal and I'd had Peter, and he had Kevin had his sort of ideas, but we needed to build and develop our own process. We've worked together 4 years now, but at this stage it was 2 years, and once we moved to Shanghai, I just really wanted to hone in on what is our model, and what are our principles, and what are the things we can't go away from, what are the things we can go away from. So I got in touch with a guy named Damien Roden, who I knew of. He's very highly regarded around the world as a football fitness coach, and now head of performance. He's now with Burnley FC in the English Premier League, but had experience with Manchester City, with Stoke, with Bolton Wanderers, and also with the Seattle Sounders in the MLS. So yeah, he's, I would say, a real master of periodization, and he's had a lot of success implementing his methodology. He's learned, and I have to say, he's quite openly says he's learned so much from Raymond Verheyen, who's pretty well known in terms of his periodization model. So, and he's not afraid to evolve and build his own way with his particular team. But I like the fact that both of those guys are really, really trusting in the model that they have, and have a certain way of doing things, and that works for them. So that's been the last sort of progression in terms of my learning in periodization.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Provides a great context for the topic, Greg, and I guess your passion for it, but also the exposures you've had to a range of different, I guess, styles of periodization is something we talked about off air about, trying to find the best fit for your environment and your squad, which can sound like common sense, but we can probably get caught up, all of us at times on the net, trying to find the shiny thing and trying to find like something that's going to make a real impact. But I guess how do you find that balance between hearing about things when you're speaking to experts and then filtering what you think's going to actually make an impact with, I guess only how the athletes are and what they need and the game model and how the coaches want to play.
Mm.
How do you go about when you're making those fine tunes, I guess year to year to your model?
Yeah, well, I definitely I fell for that earlier in my career. I I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I had a set of principles that worked, but I was learning and I was taking from different people. I was trying to fit in what the coaches wanted to do, and even sometimes the what the head coach wants to do is different from what the assistant coach wants to do. Like it's yeah, it's a process of making mistakes and evolving. And along that process, I've worked out that you can't pick and choose and take from every little thing that's out there. And now like there's so much information, and there's so much good information. It's evidence based. There's like a ton of different things that work. You can almost prove anything is going to benefit performance. There's also obviously in football being such a hyped sport around the world, there's just fads that come in. They come and go just based on a team that performed in the World Cup, or a team that had a sort of out of the box season. So yeah, you develop um, a way to filter, but you've also got to develop your confidence. you've also got to build a really strong relationship with the manager and the assistant coaches, because if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to if you're not going to be able to implement what you want. And when we're assuming here what we want is correct, which is not always the case, but
Yeah.
you want to be right more often than you're not. And but if you don't, even someone who does have that knowledge and would make majority correct decisions, if you don't have that relationship with the manager and the assistant coach, then you can't you can't implement what you want. So uh, that's that's such an important piece of the puzzle.
Going back to your
Mm.
comment earlier, you talked about, I guess, different agendas, and maybe, head coaches obviously got their big rocks. Maybe it's defense, and then some of the assistant coaches are heavily focused on the attack. And how do you? I mean, obviously the head coach is the priority,
Yeah.
being the boss. But yeah, how do you go about, I guess, filtering? Make sure that everyone's heard, I guess, and feel like they're valued, and you having a well balanced program that's, I guess, serving the big rocks to helping team performance, but also that's feeling like everyone's contributing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel I'm quite fortunate in the fact that I've worked in smaller programs, like in terms of staff. Uh, you know, obviously the A League, and then when we went to Japan, the just I guess just the way the environment is when foreign coaches come to a country like Japan or China. You know, the first year in Japan we had three Australian coaches, and we're expected to run the program, and the local staff assist, and we use them as best we can. That's why we're brought in. And then in China, we've had up to, we have five Australians this year, which was fantastic, and an English goalkeeper coach. So it was a little bit more there, but very different from a lot of other sports. And I obviously I've got experience in AFL, and big Premier League teams where you've got so many coaches, and everybody has their mandate to be successful in their area, whether it's attack, midfield, defence, set plays, stoppage, whatever it is. And then you've got a number of off-field coaches, strength and conditioning, um, whatever it is that have to achieve some targets as well. It's for someone periodizing in that environment, it's got to be a lot more difficult.
Mm.
Um, and you have to be really strong in what your principles are, and what the level, what's of high importance, what's of low importance, and what's out the door. So yeah, I guess that's I've been fortunate with that. Uh, in terms of answering your question more detail, in terms of if that was the case, the key is I think the key is to have a smaller amount of staff making the key decisions, and I think in my environment, it's vital that the head assistant coach and I have a really close relationship. Doesn't mean we can't be disagreeing with each other, and but in the end, someone's got to decide what goes into training, how long it is, what size the pitch, what size the fields are, the intensity. In the end, someone has to decide that, and um, it's important that you discuss as a group. But I think that's what I've tried to develop is the ability to be able to put that to the head coach to make a final decision. Uh,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah,
That's
and you can't.
uh,
Yeah, times you can't. There's times you just can't fit everything in, but the team that's important for the team to be successful because it's if you do, then you're going to make mistakes. Um, whether it's poor performance, injuries, fatigue, um, overcomplicating things, whatever that might be.
and across football codes like rugby league and AFL and soccer that you've been exposed to, what I guess periodization sort of do you feel models feel most transferable across those different team sports, field sports?
Yeah, the three that I've And the three that I've learned in a lot of detail, and I mean, I don't know too many that aren't using similar structures, I guess, but that doesn't mean it's the same model. And I'll explain what I mean in a second. But um, I guess similar structures in terms of how the sessions are applied each week and what days. But the three that I've learned closely is tactical periodization, which I have to say I've never used to its exact principles and and uh, and and loadings across the week. And that's when I say that, I don't mean like adapted versions of tactical periodization, which are kind of we see a lot in different sports around the world. It's became the in thing for a while with a lot of success. Some of the stuff I've read about in rugby, they've implemented elements of it to have a lot of success. But in terms of Fraud's tactical periodization, the I guess the inventor of it, where you train 5 days in a row leading into a game. I've never implemented that, but I have an understanding of how it would be implemented, and I think in some environments would work really well. You have to be very disciplined. And then there's football periodization, which is it's the behind model really in terms of what I call football periodization. Um, and there's some adaptations of the behind model. And then there's the what I would call modified football periodization, which I know Damien Roden also calls sort of traditional British periodization model, which will have the -3 match day -3 off, and then the team will train. They'll have match day +1 off. They'll train +2, -4, -3 off, then train -2, -1 leading into the match. And that's the one I've got the most experience with. Um, we we started out trying to do the Barcelona model at Adelaide United was quite similar to the tactical periodization model. However, it was only 4 days leading into the match, and we started out with that. We ended up adapting and modifying it to have the -3 off, and then with working with Ange and Pete, that was their preferred model also, and then we just continue with that then with Kevin Muscat at Yokohama, and we've taken that now uh, to to Shanghai. Now, in terms of the implementation of that structure, we still use the same structure, but we are now much more aligned and disciplined with following the football periodization, the modified football periodization, in terms of how we load and how we approach the week and the principles of the week.
When implementing a new method or a version of that method, what are some of your ways of, I guess, identifying that you feel like it's getting the response you're looking for? Is it subjective feedback from some of your leaders? Is it the coaches? Is it some data in testing? Or how do you sort of get a sense of, or is it ultimately just wins and losses in the in season? If you bring something new in the preseason, take us through, I guess, your process on thinking, okay, I feel like that made a real significant change. We're going to keep that for next year, or no, that didn't get the result you're looking for. We need to keep searching.
Yeah, it's. I'm really big on speaking to the players, and I know you can't, you can't put the cart before the horse. And there's a few other different sayings that people use when they say, "Oh, don't let the players make the decisions." But I'm pretty big on that, and you can get some really good feedback from the right from the right athletes in terms of how do they how well conditioned do they feel? How do they feel going into the match? How recovered are they when we go into our loading session or our conditioning session? All of those things, because one, they're the ones that are feeling it, and they're the ones that have to perform. And two, that's really good information to feed back to the coaches to see whether we need to make a change. I think that mixed with how the coaching staff feel we performed in terms of how and a lot and a lot of it is subjective and with some objective data as well coming in there. I don't think you can use the I don't think you can use too much from GPS opta data type um, yeah match data to really inform the performance level, from a physical point of view. But I think a bit of a blend where it's mostly subjective from the coaches in terms of how well did we implement the game strategy, how intense were we in the key areas, whether it was pressing with the ball, transition moments, those things that they will generally be able to give you a feel after the game and then also a feel after they've reviewed the game on video. Those two things are probably the key. And then from there, also looking, I guess, more longitudinally across the season or across multiple seasons to say, okay, where were our flat points? Were injuries a problem this season? In general, was our, did we feel our physical performance? Were we not able to play at the intensity we wanted? Were we not able to play at the intensity across the 90 minutes? Those things we need to be asking ourselves regularly and discussing as a coaching group. To see just to make sure, because it's so important to have with our periodization model, it's so important to have everybody on the same page. And of course, there's going to be questions and doubts when you've had a bad run of form, even one bad game. So yeah, there's I'd say those are the three areas that we got reviewing regularly.
Yep. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate it, Greg. And what about in season? Like you mentioned, you've been with Kevin for the last 4 years, so stability, I imagine, helps in terms of you guys being on the same page. Do you have particular physical parameters on your plus day and -3, for example, or is it more technical, sort of tactical focus when you're in season for a 7-day break? That is.
Yeah, well, if you're happy, Jack, I don't want to spend too long on the minor details, but I'll delve a little bit more into sort of how we approach the week in a short version. I guess the principles. The first key principles are the first part of the week, the first 48 hours is recover the players. The middle 2 days of the week, and this is assuming, Jack, that which is rare, but it does. This is assuming we've got a Saturday to Saturday game, and we start with there, and then we can adapt the model based on how many days between the games, and based on what are the key principles. So on a full week, recovery, and then we got the loading phase in the middle part of the week, and then we got the tapering phase where we try to make sure the players are ready to perform and feeling fresh leading into the match. And we've done all the tactical components that the coaching staff feel that we needed to work on. So they're the three phases of the week. So we will generally, we're quite adaptable in the recovery phase in terms of there's always a day off, one of those 2 days. Sometimes we'll have the first day off, and then we'll bring them back in for what we call a reintro session, where it's the players that have recovered to the level that we want them to. So there's no specific issue showing up from our objective data. They're not reporting any specific concerns. Well, we get them on the field, and we like them to do some what we call extensive passing, some possession games that doesn't have too much in the way of intensity, and get them prepared then for the loading phase, which is coming the next day on the +3 -4. Other times we'll have them come in to do recovery the day after. That gives us the opportunity also to train the subs and the non-playing group at a high intensity because they missed the match, and then we'll have the +2 off. Either way, the players that played in the game, we're making sure that they're recovered by the time we get to the +3 or the -4. Then we'll load. So you probably understand in football now. Typically, we will try to get our loading and our conditioning within certain games. So, and this is where I think I'm really comfortable with the Verheyen model in terms of how we load, and that looks like 2 week blocks. First 2 weeks is large-sided, where the fields are bigger, and the length of the blocks of the length of the sets is longer, so more voluminous. And then we'll go to medium space, where we have a medium sizing of the field based on meters squared per player, and the blocks are shorter, and obviously the games are more intense. And then we'll do 2 weeks of small-sided games. But as you can imagine, Jack, we never have 6 weeks in a row where we can implement that without a midweek game or without some kind of break or international window, etc. And then we'll have the day off after our conditioning day. That's our preferred model, to give them a day off after our conditioning day, which is a -3. And then we've got our tapering / preparation for the game block, where we will do generally our main tactical on the -2, which is the first day back. But we have to be wary that what impact did the conditioning session have on them? They've had a day off, so we have to slowly build them into that session and avoid too much intensive work. And then the -1, if we still need to do some more tactical, we'll incorporate it there. We'll make sure that the spaces are complementary with the day before. For example, if we did 3/4 pitch or full pitch tactical on the -2, we'll now make it, we won't go over half pitch. We'll make it smaller. And then we'll generally do some kind of intense game, but really low volume. It might be a small size field with sort of medium sized numbers. So I always say it looks more intense than what it is because the ball moves fast, but the players don't move as much. So a lot of reactions and fast decision making. That's kind of generally what our week looks like.
Fantastic. There's some great detail there. And from a speed point of view, was that the -2 is where you get your sort of exposures, where if you need to with certain players?
Yeah, I think this is, and I sort of penciled this in for your question at the end, Jack. But we can discuss now, like, about some beliefs that I hold that are a bit opposed to I guess majority of people in our industry. And when I was at Adelaide United and Yokohama, the first 2 years, and even with Kevin, I was pretty strict with trying to incorporate, maximum velocity, or at least over 90%, aiming over 95% on the -2 after the day off. The last couple of years, we've really tried to, in China, we were working with players. We felt the base was pretty low in terms of their level of conditioning and their level of conditioning to play the way we wanted to. So we really worked hard on pushing that conditioning session on the -4. And yeah, following, I think working closely with Damien too, we didn't necessarily rush to expose them to high velocities on that -2 because we were reintroducing them back in after the day off in the conditioning session. We were getting our tactical work in. We made that session not so intensive, and then yeah, often -1, I'll give them some run throughs, where we're aiming to get one rep over 90% on -1. However, I'm not tied to every week ensuring players are hitting over 90, 95%. No, it's some people disagree with that. I feel the players that need to mostly will get it in the game. The players that don't play the game and have a high chance of getting it if they do play, we will do it. We will do it, whether it's the day after the game or on the game day. And then I probably use then a 2 week block where if we haven't hit it within 2 weeks, now I'm starting to get a little bit edgy because we do have some players that, are capable or will occasionally hit really high velocities, and every player in the team could hit, really high velocities at any point if they play a game. So I'll be trying to make sure that we achieve that if we're getting close to or over 2 weeks.
And that makes sense. Yeah, and that seems to align with the models that I've been exposed to. Yeah, not getting too greedy. They're not track and field athletes, but just giving them the amount of appropriate dose, I guess, to keep them robust and available, opposed to maybe true speed development.
Mm.
Yeah, they're getting their game speed in the games and the game itself. So yeah, the match load session that you talked about there for those that don't play,
Mm.
and then you've got subs and those sort of things. What's the process around that? Is that are you allowed to use the pitch straight after games? And I imagine sometimes you're not, so that's why you do it the next day. And yeah, talk us through, I guess, how that can
Yeah,
times to manage the squad.
yeah. No, in China, mostly we can, which is good. In Japan, we weren't able to anywhere, which made it difficult. Like, and then even as you know, and a lot of people probably thinking right now, when you go on the pitch at 10 p.m. after a match, and the player's been sitting potentially, we can only warm up 6 at a time, so potentially the player's just been sitting down the whole second half. You can't just roll out and go into max velocity, and the player won't do it either. Like, well, in football, there's quite a few of them that just won't do it, even if you prescribe it. So you have to get a little bit, adaptable with that, and okay, maybe we just get some aerobic conditioning into them after the game. Even doesn't matter. I'm not tied to certain high speed numbers. Can we get a couple of blocks of sort of aerobic intervals into them? If we can, if not, ideally for me, we train the next day, and uh, you know, as long as they pull up all right and they didn't play too many minutes in the match the night before, I think you can aim to hit high velocities, and then yeah, and then if not, you know, we could look to use the conditioning day or use the -2 or even use the -1 for one repetition, something like that to try to get it. It is one of those ones that's constantly on your mind, I guess. I know the importance of it. Uh, However, one thing I've learned over the years is it's not the be all and end all of something that has to be fit into the program every week.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So like if a player's maybe flagged in screening and the physios feel like they're not 100% there, and your gut's telling them they're a bit off, and maybe they haven't hit speed 95 plus for 20 days, you're not stressed on forcing it that day.
Mm.
Save
Yeah,
it for another day type thing. Yeah.
yeah.
What about resources over the years? What's obviously you've learned a fair bit from coaches that you've been exposed to, and practitioners in the industry that you've referenced. But is there, for those that want to dive deep into periodization? What are some of your go-tos, whether it be books or online content?
Yeah, I mean, I'll use the opportunity to plug for Damien Roden, who has been, just a really amazing resource for me to use directly the last few years, and 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 now actually we with my sort of connections in Japan, we're trying to give them an opportunity to use some of his resources in Japan, getting things translated. He's obviously he will not obviously, but he's got a book called Fit for Every Game, which I think is an excellent resource for anyone, whether it's working in football or a different sport. You can see it just paints the picture and of how important having a specific model is, and the possibilities, like the how of what you can build with your squad if you do. It's a really fantastic resource. I mean, I would um, I'd also look at Raymond Verheijen's book and and his work. So you can see his like you can see the success that he's had with using that specific model in question what you want to question. How would you adapt it? Would you implement it directly? Those kind of things. Uh, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at doing the tactical Master of Tactical Periodization next year, which is based in Portugal, in with Porto University and FC Porto, which yeah, and there's some really good books on tactical periodization. Uh, yeah, I mean, a good. I think there was a fantastic sort of review of periodization and planning microcycles from Martin Boucher a couple of years back, which was a research paper which is almost like um, not a really thorough article on some things. And I guess with those types of things though, where it's a really detailed review of the literature that's out there, you've just got to be really careful with saying, okay, I'm going to try to implement everything from this research paper or from these research papers into my program. So, uh, yeah, that'd be my go-tos.
What about as a bit of a case, for the listeners, if you go to a new club, what's sort of your key things to analyze? You've been exposed to a range of different methods now. Uh,
Mm.
so obviously you've got your head coach and their philosophy and their background and their beliefs. The squad, the profiling of the squad in terms of age and performance. Typically, generally new head of performances go to clubs that aren't performing that well.
Mm.
So you imagine that the team's not going that well. Yeah. What are some of the talk us through? I guess your process on, okay, I think I'm gonna you know apply this model, or be heavily influenced by this particular model, or this is the one that I'm going to pitch to the head coach that might be
Yeah,
to what he's used to, or do you simply align to the head coach's model for year one and get buy-in that way? Yeah. What's your
yeah. Uh, that's where if it's in football, so another in a new football environment with a new head coach, you have to look really closely at what they've been doing the last few years, and what that coach, the type of microcycle and the periodization model that they've been using. Do they have a specific model? Are they just adapting each week? Are they making decisions on the fly? But you'll still be able to get a good feel for generally what do they do, how do they load throughout the week. Uh, I know you need to know, and definitely you need to understand the way they want to play, but I think with periodization models, if you've got a specific model, it doesn't matter too much the way the coach wants to play it. One might be park the bus, sit back, play on the counter. One might be high possession, high pressing, um, try to dominate all aspects of the game. Now, that's going to look different in terms of if you look at if you look at the GPS data or the the movement analysis data, they're going to look quite different. However, if you implement a football periodization or a tactical periodization model, you're going to train like that because the coach, when you play 11v11, he's not going to all of a sudden say, okay, we're playing high pressing, high possession. He's going to play, he's going to instruct them to play the way you're going to play on the weekend, hopefully. So you're going to build the physical capacities to play the way the manager and the coaching staff want to play by training this way. So I don't think it's, yes, you need to understand it, but I don't think it's as important as what some people make out. So you've got a feel for how they've typically trained. Okay, so I'm used to doing -3 off, but this coach wants to train 4 days leading into the game. So now my study of the different periodization models says to me, okay, well now how do we adapt this to be more like the football periodization model where we're going to still recover days 1 and 2, but we're going to train the day after the game. We're going to have +2 off. Then we're going to come in. This is our loading phase, but it's our first session back. So now I'm going to be trying to make sure the coaches try as best I can to get them on board in terms of, okay, this session we've got to be a little bit careful. Okay, we're in the loading phase, but the players did it off really light recovery and then a day off. So now their coordination is going to be a little bit off. Their nervous system's not going to be firing as it should be. We have to be a little bit wary this day. If we do that, well, now we can work hard on the -3. From there, you have to be then really careful and really, be really smart with your planning in terms of then the 2 days leading into the game, because now you're working 4 days in a row leading into the game. You've got to incorporate tactical work. Maybe you could do some of that within the conditioning session on -3. And now we're trying to taper and perform on the weekend and fit in the tactical. So you're probably going to be focusing on that first day back and then the last two to, I guess, show that you know what you're talking about and you can put the different pieces, you can incorporate most of what they want to incorporate into the week if we do it, I guess, in a structured, intelligent way.
Going back to what you said, if there is an extreme model like the park the bus model, I imagine that's, yeah, like you said, it's going to have a physical demand. So you want to train specifically to prepare them for how you want to play, but then
Yeah.
conversely, I guess, for injury risk and exposing them to worst case scenarios to mitigate injury. Is it your role to consult the coaches on creating drills that get the opposite result, so, but expose them to physical demands where maybe they're out of control of the game, and to get those sort of conditioning parameters, or do you simply just look at it as, okay, well, that's what we're going to get from the tactical drills, and then I've got to artificially top up the conditioning and expose the athletes to worst case scenario, with conditioning.
Yeah, then that does happen. That does happen a lot, and I've had many moments where you feel, okay, we're not getting the exposure that we need within training to be able to play the way we can see we're playing, what the data suggests in terms of what outputs we're getting within the game. And I guess that's where the more experience you get with understanding the game, understanding the demands of the game that we're going to play, putting drills together. I don't think you need to be really good at putting drills together in my role, but you need to be able to sit there with the assistant, head assistant, and the second assistant coach and be able to say, okay, every day we need to discuss, after training, we need to discuss the next day and go through how we're going to do that. Because, yeah, there's plenty of coaches around the world and plenty of programs around the world where, they'll get so much running in transition in a game, but then in training they're training on half a pitch or smaller than half a pitch, and real focus on possession and things like that, or real focus on defending the box, real focus on combinations in the front third. Like, I don't want to get too football technical, but I know you can understand what I'm saying. But they never get any transition. So yeah, there's two ways you can go. Okay, well, on the conditioning day, we're going to do some additional high speed running and sprint work. You can do that isolated. You might say, okay, I want to design a drill where we get that's specific to some of our transition moments. Or you might just sit with I think most coaches will understand what we're saying right here, and they'll appreciate having that discussion in terms of, look, this is what the game looks like that we play. This is what our trainings look like. Our training looks like. So be willing enough, be sort of brave enough to let the coaches then design that. And you might not get what you're looking for, but as long as you stay, I guess, true to your model, you probably can't go too far wrong. So don't don't put that on if you're worried that it's going to be a really, really a lot of transitions, a lot of high speed running, a lot of sprint, don't put it on the -2 or don't put it on the +2. Put it in the middle of the week and go, okay, well, if we got more than we wanted, then we have to adapt the last couple of days of the week.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, mate. Well, we could probably talk for hours.
Yeah.
Oh,
I get a bit excited. I do enjoy discussing this kind of stuff, and I would have liked to have asked you some more questions. In terms of how, in terms of, you got obviously got a lot of experience, working and speaking to people within AFL and other sports in terms of what types of, I guess, periodization strategies and methodologies are they using. But I don't know, maybe we don't have time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I
But
think,
feel free to go ahead.
yeah, I think it's, I mean, rugby league, certainly like last year, or the year that I've been into it, it's heavily tactical. And perhaps maybe the game, because it's not 360 degrees, you can really get a lot of the physical parameters. AFL's, with the demands of how long it is and the 360-degree nature, I think there's probably a lot more conditioning or traditional conditioning, straight line running, non-football related conditioning in it. But yeah, typically the AFL teams, probably similar to Port Adelaide, if they're developing, they tend to like the +2 and -2 because they can get two good footy sessions out. Where the probably Premiership windows teams seem to like the -3 in the middle of the week because the senior boys get -2 off mentally, and they feel like they're far enough away from the game to get a really hot session in. But you're only really getting one quality footy session in that model.
Yeah.
So it seems like most teams seem to be either going one or two of those ones. But where rugby league, there's probably a bit more of a range. Some are heavily still in the fit. Football coaches will do the tactical, technical, and S&C's role is to get them fit. And then yeah, and the club that I'm at the moment, it's highly collaborative. Like all the S&Cs are in the meetings with the coaches, and we try and get the football involved as much as possible. And then the conditioning's just there if maybe a player's trying to bridge the gap because they've come off an injury. But apart from that, it's yeah, get the game, which I think's become heavily influenced from rugby union and international game and football, soccer, the world game, by the sounds of it.
Mm. Yeah, and I guess, you know, how do you approach it? Like obviously in AFL and even more so in rugby league, the contact. I've been to visit some NFL teams and watched, and you know, they're not even allowed to have contact. They're only allowed a certain amount of contacts per week. And that's one sport I go, it would be so difficult to implement a tactical periodization or like, yeah, let's call it a tactical periodization model there. So how do you get around that in a sport like rugby league? Is it do you just do unopposed work that's tactical and with decision making and um, you know reactivity to some kind of opposition, or do they actually play? Do they actually have a scrimmage, for want of a better word? How do
Yeah.
they approach that?
Yeah, I think you do need to, as you get closer to the, so around that January period where you're getting used to trials, I guess you're getting close to the end of the funnel. Your wrestle sessions are coming down. The way you're doing it in isolation, the tackles or the win the ground we call it, and tackle with the wrestle coach, and then you're starting to get more of it in like arm wrestle drills and match play drills where the
Yeah,
was on. Where this time of year preseason, it's sort of breaking up attack drills where they're wanting overspeed, so you sort of take the collision out of it, and you might do small sort of games where touch is involved and that way, yeah, you're getting fast ball movement and fast leg speed,
yeah,
and hard conditioning as well. But yeah, and then as you're getting closer, you start to, and they're doing 4 wrestle sessions a week, which they typically do in the afternoons with gym. So something to be mindful of when the guys are in the
yeah,
second station after just doing 40 to 50 minutes of a wrestle session, and then
yes,
the gym, you've got to take that into account with bench press and so forth.
yeah,
Because it's incredibly demanding on their shoulders and neck. But yeah, so things are sort of in isolation, I guess, similar to probably I imagine all sports. You're breaking down the game into small bits of the puzzle, and then as you're getting
mm,
to the games, you start piecing it all together into simply playing the game.
mm,
But yeah,
yeah,
they need to know if they're getting their shoulder strap pre-session, if it's going to be a hot, if there's any arm wrestle in there or proper um, session. Whereas if it's just purely a game where there's no real collision, then yeah, it's completely different. And it's more a conditioning type skill based focus.
yeah, yeah, and it's I mean, depending on the sport, I think the models the models can transfer. I believe these kind of models that I've discussed today can transfer, majority of the principles and the aspects to most running based field sports.
Yep.
And whether that's AFL, rugby league, field hockey, basketball, netball. There's a huge range. Lacrosse is one that would be pretty similar to football. I would guess.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. However, you know, in football, in my football, that and my strong belief is there's not a lot of off-field work required to build the physical capacities that you need. I believe strongly if you get your planning and your periodization, your implementation of that in terms of your drills, the intensity, um, sticking with the model, um, making sure the intensity is above match intensity when we need it to be. You get your physical development, you get your eccentric loading, you get your aerobic conditioning, you get your anaerobic conditioning, all of those things, your mechanical stress that's required to deal with the rigors of the season. And, the off field is supporting that. So in our program, pre-training really important because we want to get the players ready to be able to train like that, whether that's neurally, psychologically, also physically. So what we do in the lead up is really important. A little bit after in terms of trying to make it more individualized in terms of their injury history, what their specific issues are, and we have some really basic team gym to I guess to I guess it's not ticking the boxes. It's making sure we're incorporating best practice, but still putting the focus on the pitch. But there's other sports, and AFL and rugby league and rugby are these sports where what you do in the gym is really important. You can't like you have to have a certain amount of weight, a certain amount of muscle mass, a certain amount of protective mass around your joints to be able to deal with the the impacts of the game. So you can't fit everything in. I think if people are listening to this and working in different sports that we haven't mentioned, or some of the ones we have, you know, you yes, I'm encouraging you to look at these and see, you know, how can I build my own? How can we as a team build our own methodology and our own principles that we believe in, we trust, we stick to, um, but really avoid trying to pick and choose and take from everything.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mm,
think 100% that seems to ring home pretty strongly with the
mm,
guests from a range of different sports when we're talking about how it all pieces together. And I think yeah, the people that have been in it for a while have recognised that you can't please everyone, you can't do everything at a really high level. So you sort of need to recognise what pick your big rocks, pick what's most important to the model, and get after it and do that consistently at a really high level to get the best results
mm.
rather than doing many things. So yeah, resonates, mate. I guess off topic, but you can connect it back to the topic: tactical periodisation, football periodisation, if you like. Pet peeves, anything in your work life that sort of fires you up?
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm on off season, so I'm pretty chilled. I've been on off season for a week. I'm pretty sure if you had have asked me a couple of weeks ago, I would have maybe had a pretty long list. Um, it's probably more so when I make mistakes that I know I shouldn't have. You know, like when I've gone away from the model, when I haven't been strong, when the head coach has wanted to do something that I know goes away from the model. Okay, still he's going to make the final decision, but that's probably that's probably the things that most regularly peeves me off, and it's a learning opportunity to get better. But yeah, I mean, I'm going into next season trying not to get peeved with other people that I work with, and try to help build them up and and everybody work together. So yeah,
No, well said, mate. What about a favourite way to spend a day off?
I mean, I must admit, I had a couple of games of golf last year. The and that was nice, but really expensive in Shanghai. The goalkeeper coach, um, Ian Walker, top guys, English guy, played a lot of games in the English Premier League. He's a goalkeeper for Tottenham and Bolton, and he loves his golf. And he eventually sort of got me out for a few games, and then you sort of get addicted. But so that's been good this year to sort of chill, you know, and on a day off and get away because Shanghai is a big city, get out of the city a little bit. But also, yeah, just it's a great city, Shanghai. So even just walking along the river with my wife and exploring different places, it's probably that's probably the better day off because with the golf I come home angry because I haven't played well, whereas the other one I finished the day happy. So
Yeah,
yeah,
couldn't have. Yeah, it's a tricky hobby to
oh,
hold golf in that.
it's,
We,
yeah,
in our world, we don't get the consistency that you probably need to do for
no,
to be to make progress. So
yeah, yeah.
get more frustrating than not. But yeah, I guess all it takes is a couple of good hits and then you're hooked again. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Then you're forking out another, yeah, couple of $100 for a new club or something like that. It's it's good fun, but it is tough.
yeah. And what about? I think you referenced this question a little bit earlier, but a popular opinion, or sorry, an opinion that you have that sort of goes against mainstream or popular consensus.
Yeah, I think I've touched on it a couple of times, and just over the years, I've built this belief that a lot of the off-field stuff that we feel is absolutely vital to fit in each week, whether it's max velocity work, whether it's Nordics, whether it's max strength work or um, high speed running load. I just I don't think it's as important as what I originally thought. I think if you get it right in terms of your training sessions on the field, your monitoring in terms of working out which players are ready for the conditioning session, which ones aren't, your recovery, in that recovery window, um, individualizing players' nutrition, things like that. I feel for me they're probably bigger rocks. And yeah, you do have to know your players individually, and some of them will have specific stuff that is going to benefit them, definitely. But that's probably something that I feel is bit different from a lot of people in our industry.
Does that come with experiencing, I guess, these periodization models and how when you get the planning right with the coaches and there's an aligned product there that's, and then, like you said, the low monitoring, you get that aspect right in terms of individualization and responding to
Yeah,
players that, might not be coping as well or players that can handle a bit more load and so forth. You get that areas right. And then there, in some regards, the other things are sort of more accessories.
yeah. I've had plenty of experience over the years in making mistakes and having injuries where you get a chance to review and work out what we feel was important aspects of it. Majority you can't work out for sure. What were the key indicators that might happen. Majority of them, sometimes you can. Um, yeah, learning from that. I visited a lot of clubs, different clubs over the years, top level clubs around the world, um, and learning from them. And like I've seen multiple times where a change of coach, which everybody knows, usually brings about more injuries. Could be a poorer performance and more injuries. Could be improved performance and more injuries. Um, but I've been to more than one place where you speak to the guys, and the year before they had this coach, and they did this kind of implementation of sprint training and this stuff in the gym, and the next year they're doing the exact same thing. However, the year before they had, you know, very minimal hamstring injuries, and this year they had 10, 15 hamstring injuries.
Oh,
Um, and okay, what was different? Well, this coach was, incorporated this periodization strategy. It was a lot more thorough. The training was more intense. Um, Principles were clear. The communication was better between all staff. Okay, well that's what happened. That's the key for me. We can't say 100%, but that's now I'm starting to get a feel for, okay, what are the important things? And I think most people in our industry know that now, and the best will always say that. So yeah,
yeah, 100%. And to wrap it up, mate, what are you most excited about for 2026 in the off season at the moment? Obviously we're recording this at the middle late December 2025. What's
yeah,
mate?
yeah. I mean, we won the league. Well, we're kind of expected to win the league. Like the teams won it 3 years in a row. We've been there too, so we've won it the last two. But it was a really challenging season. We we had a lot of changeover of players, lost a lot of key players. We brought some local players in, and we brought some players in that couldn't cope physically with what we wanted them to do. Um, so we made some mistakes. We're really confident in the periodization model we're using. So I'm excited just to plan now again another preseason. Um, how can we build? We've got a little bit longer before our first competitive game next year, which is nice. So yeah, how can we build the players that weren't up to it this year? How can we progress the ones that were? How do we incorporate the new players? After a few days, I was really excited to sit down and start planning. So I am excited about another season with this group and seeing what we can do. And then hopefully doing the tactical periodization master, and then working more with Damien in terms of the fit for every game stuff, whether that's in Japan or in Australia. So yeah, trying to educate coaches, whether that's head coaches, assistant coaches, fitness coaches, on how they can do things, how they can incorporate some of this stuff for him, has stood the test of time.
Fantastic. Yeah, we really appreciate you jumping on, Greg, and diving into a topic that, yeah, I'm passionate about. I've had 3 pages of notes, and no doubt the listeners have got some takeaways as well. For those that have some follow-up questions or perhaps interested in you and Damien's work, where's the best place to get in touch?
Yeah, you can. I mean, happy to give out my email address. Is it better just to send that to?
Yeah, I can add that to the show notes.
Yeah, happy to give out my email address. Probably the best way to contact me. And yeah, I think probably wouldn't get too much from my socials. And then yeah, I'll send you. I've got a website, the adp.com.au, which I can send you, and then Damien's website's fit for every game .com, I believe, but I can send all of those through to you.
Fantastic. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, for those that tuned in halfway or the end here on the live YouTube episode, make sure to wind it right back to the start. There's gems all the way through. And if you're listening and driving the car, don't sweat. I'll add all the links that Greg's just referenced there in the show notes. So when you park, you can easily access them there. Thanks again for everyone that's tuned in. This is our last interview for 2025. Thanks for all the those that have listened and engaged with the podcast. Our next live episode will be with Stu Cormack, which will be 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, the 21st of January. So I look forward to seeing you guys then.